Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Jessica Weingarten. I'm with Indivisible Chester County. Welcome to Civics Night. Y'all have a handout, which is what we're going to be covering this evening. And I want this to be interactive. So if you have questions, ask questions. If I talk too fast, tell me I talk too fast. If there's something else you want to know, let me know. So let's start out with what is civics. Anybody know what civics is? It's the study of the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. And I have a friend who's a lawyer who had really wanted to be here, but he's recovering from a heart attack. So lesson to all of you, watch your diet and get some exercise. And what he always likes to say is that the thing about civics is better civics is only one election away. So when you think about actions that are civics, you can think about things that people do in addition to voting that have an impact on government and on law and on how society works. So that would include things like the American Revolution, the Underground Railroad, the Civil Rights Movement, the Suffragette Movement. I like to tell people I'm a beneficiary of that. My mother's mother went to jail twice during the 19-teens so that I and all the other girls can vote today. And I take that very seriously, which is why if you look at the ICC website or our Facebook page, I'm always going, and remember to vote. It's just so important, always know when the next election is. Because my grandmother went to jail so I can vote, and I take that very, very seriously. And just shameless plug, we'll be doing voter registration training so that you can always be your own voter registration drive at any point in time. You can have a car like mine that comes completely equipped with pens, clipboards, voter registration forms in 2 languages, copy of the ICC voter guide so that you know who can and cannot register, etc. So that's civics. Now, civics is not a good idea under every type of government. Think about it. How much civic action do you really want to take in a place like Iran or Russia? Probably not. Civics is important in a place like the United States of America because we're a democracy. And a democracy is one of the different types of government systems that there is. And democracy in America, there's sign-in sheets and get a handout. Democracy in America is predicated on the idea of we the people. Does anybody know where we the people comes from?
Constitution.
Yes, the preamble of the US Constitution, one of the greatest documents ever written, was the first time that a nation was formed to be subservient to the will of law, and no one is above the law. And hopefully this is the year that we find that out, please. And we'll see how that goes. Democracy is so important a concept that when the country was going through one of its worst periods of strife, the Civil War, the president at the time, Abraham Lincoln, said that government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not be banished from the face of the earth. That saving the country, saving democracy, was the most important thing that there was. Does that make sense to everybody? Does it make you want to go out there and do something? Yes. So, yes, ma'am.
Is that the point that you were making earlier before you started that's so different about the United States?
No, about Pennsylvania. We haven't gotten there yet. We're still at the federal level.
Oh, okay.
I'll let you know when we hit Pennsylvania. It's on your thing there.
I can't remember if the point was about the U.S. or
No. There's a court system in Pennsylvania that's a little different from everything else. So the Constitution is made up of 3 parts. The preamble, we the people, and then there are the articles. And the articles define how the federal government should run, what the country is obligated to, like it's obligated to pay its debts, what is excluded, what rights are accorded to the states, what rights are accorded to individuals, and that was kind of amorphous. And the US Constitution was a negotiated settlement because we had the Articles of Confederation. That's what it was the Declaration of Independence. We're going to leave Great Britain. And then we had the Articles of Confederation because we had 13 colonies. Some had their own navies, all printed their own money. They had different rules and regulations. Some had slaves, some didn't. And after a time, the Articles of Confederation weren't working so well. So the idea was people got together in Independence Hall in Philadelphia, the building that's still there, to get together to write a document that would be stronger and better than the Articles of Confederation, so that instead of there being 13 states and commonwealths that hung out together, there would be a country. And people, if you think people are polarized now, people were very polarized then. It actually was all men. Excuse me. So they had to negotiate things, and they knew that the Constitution was going to be a living document so that over time it would get better. It's what we now in IT call the continuous improvement process. Everybody familiar with that? Works in IT? Yes. Joy. So they did things like they called people who were not white 3/5 of a human being. And they did that for the purposes of apportioning different things and doing different kinds of counts. And the people who negotiated that hoped that eventually that would go away. And it did, 13th, 14th Amendments. And so if not for that, that was a real stumbling block. But people had to approve the Constitution, not just the guys who sat in the room. It had to be signed by all 13 colonies. And New York was going to be a problem. New York was rather big. It was the biggest state at the time. And so John Jay, James Madison, and Alexander Hamilton wrote this set of documents called the Federalist Papers. Has anybody ever read the Federalist Papers? My personal favorite is number 10, which is about factionalism, written by my boy, James Madison, and I love James Madison. I love what he stood for. I love what he wrote. I've been to the Red Fox Inn where he used to stop when he was going from his farm to Washington, D.C. I've seen the room he slept in. I like to go to the Constitution Center and go to the Bronze Room and just hug him because I love him so much. And he's just my size. He really is, both 5'4". And he's a little taller because he's got, like a thing underneath him in the Bronze Room, but I get on my toes and we're the same size. And the Federalist Papers were a way of convincing people that the Constitution was a good idea. And if you read them, you get to understand the logic behind why we're doing what we're doing, why we're writing it this way, and what it's going to do for us. Or as we like to say in IT now, what's in it for me? And those were the things. They didn't print a book. They didn't sell it on Amazon. They wrote the papers and they nailed them up on the various bulletin boards where people would come to read newspapers, because that's what they did back then. I advise you to read the Federalist Papers, especially number 10, my favorite. So we've got a democracy. We've got civic action. We've got a constitution. We've got the Federalist Papers. And what they birthed was this way that the federal government is set up. I like to go to the Constitution Center. I go as often as I can. I feel very happy there. And I take people with me because it's a different sort of tour of the Constitution Center than you can get any other way. And I like to take them up to the second floor, and they have big floor-to-ceiling windows, and it looks down the mall to Independence Hall and to that building where they're now storing the Liberty Bell. And I point out that the Founding Fathers and their wives, sisters, brothers, children, they risked everything. They were guilty of treason against the crown, and they did all of that so that today we could breathe free. It's why they did it. And personally, I never take that for granted, not for a day. It's why if you read what I write and you come and see what I do, It's why whenever I'm not at work or taking care of my dog, I am out there doing everything I can to make the world a better place, to help get better people elected who will serve the people in honor of those people who risked their lives and sometimes died so that we could breathe free today. So they formed 3 branches of the federal government. And y'all know what they are, the 3 branches?
Legislative, judicial, and executive.
That's correct. Legislative, executive, and judicial. And that is a series of checks and balances. And that is how it's supposed to work. And the way things are supposed to happen is that laws are written by the Congress, which is comprised of the Senate and the House of Representatives. And because I get this question a lot, which is better? Neither is better. They have different purposes. The House of Representatives, which is the people's house, was designed to declare war, to start any legislation that involves spending your tax dollars or any federal funds. And the Senate, which didn't used to be directly elected, that was something that they changed in the Constitution. Senators used to be appointed, and they would come out of the states. That's fewer people for an entire state than the representatives, unless the population is very low. Because there's 2 senators for every state, but the number of representatives is predicated on the number of people who live in a state as dictated by the census every 10 years, which is why we have a census of all persons in the United States. Not all citizens, all persons. And it used to be all persons plus 3/5 of persons that weren't white, but they've changed that, thank you. So now it's all persons. So in case anybody asks you, not citizens, that's wrong. It's in the Constitution. And the Senate is the place where it's like the great deliberative body, because it's easier to deliberate when you have 100 people than when you have several hundred people. The other thing is the number of representatives in the House of Representatives hasn't really changed, except for 3 years, since like the 1920s. Used to be that they kept having more people as the country grew bigger. The only time that changed briefly was after Alaska and Hawaii became states, and they said, you know, we're going to give a couple of representatives for the District of Columbia, but then they took them away. So that was the only time that changed. The District of Columbia is taxation without representation. It's on their license plates. So that's what the legislature does. It passes laws. And the laws need to be legitimate. And if they're not, you can sue them. And if you have standing to sue them, it goes through the court system. And if it's a constitutional issue, it ends up in front of the Supreme Court. Because the Supreme Court interprets different cases with respect to what the Constitution says. Some people are what they call, quote unquote, strict constitutionalists, and they say, all those changes, we don't go with them. It's really what they, you know, did back in the 1700s. But most people are like, no, we have electricity now. So they look at things kind of different. Electricity is a really good thing. And then there's the executive branch. And the executive branch is supposed to be like the managerial branch, which is why the current administration is not the best there's ever been. And I thought that was kind of nice of me. Anyway, they're supposed to run things because government works. If you look at what happened with the recent shutdown, government does things. Government sends money to people who don't have enough money to eat, so they get their SNAP cards loaded. They provide housing assistance for elderly, disabled, and very poor people so that they don't die at 50 below zero. And they do other things. They're supposed to protect the lands and the air and the water. And it's the implementation of all of these things that the executive branch is supposed to do. Does that make sense to everybody? Over time, the checks and balances have fallen away because there are responsibilities that the Congress has, Congress being both the House of Representatives and the upper chamber of the Senate to oversee what the executive branch does. And certain people, not naming names, but his initials are Mitch McConnell, has been unwilling to bring things to the floor that could get voted on because he doesn't want Donald Trump to veto them. And so that, hi, welcome, please sign in, you can get a handout. Yo, you betcha. And so the bottom line is Congress not only has the right to pass laws and send them to the president for signature or veto, and then if vetoed, take a vote to be able to see if that can be overcome, but they have an obligation to do so. And they've been very lax in doing so. Another thing that Congress has been lax about since the start of the Second Gulf War is it is the duty of Congress to declare war. And so we've had many undeclared wars. Korea was a police action, Vietnam was never declared, because people don't really want to declare war. You know, Grenada, Iran, all these things, they just don't want to. So they sort of go along after 9/11, we'll pass the Patriot Act. Very few people didn't vote for the Patriot Act. Raise your hand if you know what the Patriot Act is. Okay, all right. So you all know which is the one senator who voted against it?
Barbara Lee.
Russ Feingold.
Oh, Russ Feingold.
Russ Feingold. And in fact, every once in a while, if you go to various auction sites, there is one copy of the U.S. Constitution that he signed and said, I never signed the Patriot Act, and I never have enough money to buy it every time it goes up for auction. But the Patriot Act gave the federal government an incredible number of powers, and the Department of Homeland Security, which is an executive branch department, because the Congress didn't stand up, because so many people were so scared after the towers fell, after the Pentagon was attacked, after the plane crashed in Sewickley, that they were willing to cede rationality to fear. So that was sort of what happened then. So that's kind of an overview of the federal government. I didn't want to spend that much time on it. I wanted to talk more about Pennsylvania and about Chester County. So we're going to move on to Pennsylvania, which is a commonwealth, not a state. It's one of 4 quote-unquote states that are commonwealths, and there are 2 more commonwealths in the whole United States of America. So the states are Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, and Massachusetts, and the 2 other commonwealths are Puerto Rico and the Northern Mariana Islands. And those 2 commonwealths are different. They're actually real commonwealths. There is no legal differentiation for a state versus a commonwealth, although the islands are different because they do not have the right to vote, and they used to be sovereign states before they became part of our group. The thing about the word commonwealth, I got a date here, up until 1780, when you would talk about a commonwealth, you would kind of talk about, well, it's a country. So some of the states, except Kentucky, which came later, decided to call themselves commonwealths as a kind of let's thumb our nose at the monarchy. We can be a commonwealth just like you. Because it's a British commonwealth, which is the people that did used to belong to that commonwealth. Although Rwanda and, what's the other country? Hold on. Mozambique now also belong to that commonwealth. But legally, in the United States, in terms of passing laws or anything like that, there's no difference. Now, Pennsylvania is interesting because Pennsylvania had a constitution before anybody else, and parts of the US Constitution came from what they derived from the Pennsylvania Constitution. Isn't that cool? We were like really the first. And we also have an executive branch, a legislative branch, and a judicial branch. And in the same way, our executive branch, the governor is like the president, the lieutenant governor is like the vice president. There are different divisions and departments, and they're supposed to kind of run the state and oversee various things that happen, including, for some reason, the roads. And I really would like to talk to them about that because my car fell in a pothole the other day. We should do better with that. And then we have a legislative branch. Now, Pennsylvania is an interesting legislative branch because there's too many people in it. It's like a full-time job. It pays, I believe, $170,000, give or take, a year, something high like that. And so we have small areas that are represented by people, which is generally good, but it costs a lot of money. And there are motions that come up every once in a while to have fewer people, but nobody wants to give up their position. Now, in the United States, the state with the greatest number of representatives per person, so they have the smallest areas, is New Hampshire. But New Hampshire is different because it's not a full-time job. You got to have a real job to be able to support yourself if you want to be a member of the legislature up in New Hampshire. When I used to live in New Hampshire, the people, admittedly a while back, but it hasn't gone up that much. What you were paid as an elected member was $5 a day, plus you got a license plate that had, whether it was the state senate or the state house, and your district number on it. You had franking privileges, which is stamping things, and you got shared secretaries. They don't have secretaries anymore, but support help. So that's something very different. The legislatures in states are completely different, and they operate completely differently. In Nebraska, they run without having party affiliations. In Texas, they only meet every other year. So I know. So there's like a whole bunch of different ways that people can do things because when they wrote the Constitution, being able to run your state was left to the states. There are some things that the federal government does that tells the state you have to do certain things. Often they're called unfunded mandates, where they say, we're going to tell you to do this, but we're not going to tell you where to get the money from. And often, though, there's kind of like a hands-off thing, unless it's an across-the-board thing, like we're going to try to get air pollution down to a certain amount, therefore we're going to have CAFE standards for the cars. CAFE standards have to do with the mileage and how much mileage the fleet for each manufacturer can have. And they did that across the country, except California sued the first time they did that. So they have higher things and different pollution things, which makes it difficult for the car people, the car manufacturers. Do they go with what the federal government says, or do they go with what California says, which is more restrictive? And in the end, often California ends up joined by a whole bunch of other states and attorneys general, and people sort of go with that. But I want to talk a lot about the judicial branch here in Pennsylvania, because it's different. First, judges are elected in Pennsylvania, as opposed to the federal bench where they are appointed. And there's a woman named Kadita Kenner who heads an initiative called Why Courts Matter. We had her speak to us last year. She's going to speak to us again this year. And she can tell you much better than I can about why there are pros and cons to both electing judges and appointing judges. There's not a clean answer for which is better. They both have their pros and cons, and I don't know them as well as she does. So when we put that on in the spring, you should come in here, Kadita, speak. She's incredible. But I want to read you some facts about the judicial system in Pennsylvania. In 2016, Pennsylvania's court system docketed 2.6 million cases. The state court system, a core function of government, receives 0.5% of the state's total budget. However, the judiciary collects far more in fines and fees than it receives. Over the past 10 years, the court system has collected nearly $4.6 billion with a B dollars. These dollars, for the most part, do not flow back to the judiciary. They're distributed to state and local governments, which include airport and parking authorities and programs that support victims. And I really hope that that does not include the Philadelphia Parking Authority. Has anybody ever had a run-in with the Philadelphia Parking Authority? I got a story I'll tell you later. The court system maintains automated statewide court case and financial management systems that provide enhanced court access and accountability to the courts, criminal justice agencies, and a host of others, including the Commonwealth citizens. Our court system can work very well, provided we elect the right judges. And there have been some scandals with judges over the past 5-10 years, including pornography, not a good thing, and people have been let go. But we elect our judges, and we've got a 4-tiered system. We've got the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, the appellate courts, of which there are 2. We've got the courts of common pleas, which are, for the most part, county-based, though there's 8 of them that have 2 counties because they're very sparsely populated. And then they have what they call the minor courts. So the minor courts are the magisterial district justices everywhere except Philadelphia County and Pittsburgh and part of Allegheny County, where they're called municipal courts. I researched why they call them magisterial versus municipal and couldn't find a good answer. You have a question?
Wait, is it a 5-tiered system or a 4-tiered system?
It's a 4-tiered system. The appellate courts, there's 2 of them. And one is the Superior Court and the other is the Commonwealth Court. So I want to get the dates right. I wrote them down. The state Supreme Court was founded in 1684, which is the oldest Supreme Court in the United States of America. It has 7 elected members, and just like the federal Supreme Court, it interprets laws versus the Pennsylvania state constitution. So you might remember that we have different congressional district lines because the state Supreme Court found that the gerrymandered districts were not in compliance with the requirements of the Pennsylvania state constitution. And then we have the appellate courts, and there's 2 of them. The older one is the state Superior Court, which was founded in 1895. And what they do is, if you go to your local magistrate and you sue your neighbor, over a fence line, and it's a civil case and it goes back and forth, and now somebody appeals, that's going to go up to the county court, and from the county court it would go up to the Superior Court. The other court at the appellate level is called the Commonwealth Court, and it was founded in 1968. It is unique to the United States. There's no other Commonwealth Court in the United States. And what makes it different is that's where, if you're going to sue the state of Pennsylvania, that's where you go. So it's 2 different lines. Now, both appellate courts can refer things to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but there's a good chance that they won't take it unless it's constitutional, and sometimes murder things go up there. So I'm going to read you this because I don't want to get these details wrong. For the state Superior Court, it's usually the final arbiter of legal disputes, and the Supreme Court may grant a petition to review a decision of the Superior Court, but most petitions are denied, and the ruling of the Superior Court stands. Cases are usually heard by a panel of 3 judges who will sit in Philadelphia, Harrisburg, or Pittsburgh, but may also be heard en banc, which means the bank of all 9 judges. And they travel. They go places. They have a road show to be able to do things, which is a good thing. If you've ever seen a TV show where they send a judge in to get a dying declaration from someone in a hospital, it's good that judges go out and do things. And then we have the Commonwealth Court. The Commonwealth Court is responsible for matters involving state and local governments and regulatory agencies. It also acts as a trial court when lawsuits are filed by or against the Commonwealth. Cases are, again, generally heard by panels of 3 judges in Philadelphia, Harrisburg, and Pittsburgh. But again, they might travel. And they can also be heard by a single judge or by the bank of 7 judges. And appeals made by state agencies will come to the Commonwealth Court. See, 1 level, 2 courts, 1 unique. It's cool, huh? See,
So the Commonwealth Court is unique, correct?
it is unique in all America.
Yeah. Were you about to say something?
Always, but please.
Okay. No, I didn't. I didn't want to ask a question. I thought I interfered with what you were going to say to me, but.
No, I brought notes so that I
Yeah.
can't get lost because
Okay.
y'all have an outline in front of you and it would be, that's my phone. It would be just terrible if I didn't follow it. Yes, ma'am.
In terms of civil law, what about criminal law? How does the court system work with
The criminal laws start at the magisterial level. So the deal with the magisterial level, the lowest level, is you get arrested for drunk driving here in Tredeffen. You're going to go in front of a woman named Annalisa Sondergaard, who's our current district magistrate, and she's going to probably give you bail or hold you over or send you to the hospital, and she will adjudicate that. If, however, you've murdered someone, she's not allowed to set bail for voluntary manslaughter or for murder, so that's going to go up to the county level. And when there are appeals for criminal, that would go from the magistrate to the Court of Common Pleas, the county level, and then to the Superior Court. Does that make sense? Okay. Do you have a question?
I was just going to confirm, so all of these judges you're talking about, they're all elected, right? And do you know on what cycle or how long?
Yeah. The magisterial justices, it's interesting in Pennsylvania because it's kind of like a rotating musical chairs thing. Magisterial justices are elected for 6 years. I can't remember in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia if that's different, but not all of them are elected like every 6 years. Some will be elected this year for 6 terms, 6 years. Some were elected 2 years ago. The higher level judges are elected and then they have recall elections or retention elections, I guess it's called, once every 10 years. So it's, unless they get bounced out for pornography or something else like that. So it's important to elect the right people. And we have a section that we're going to get to that's going to talk about the different judicial offices that are up this year and who's running for them, because it's important. Yes, ma'am.
Is there a mandatory retirement for any of the courts, common pleas?
I don't know. I don't think so. I do not know. But you know something? I'll find out.
Wasn't that a ballot initiative a couple years ago?
I think it didn't pass. Did it not? Did it? It didn't pass. I'm sorry? It's 75. Are you sure I don't have to look it up then? I'll go with 75.
Drop it down to 72.
Yeah, that was on a ballot.
Yeah.
In 2016.
2016, a year that will live in infamy. Thank you for that. Did I get anything else wrong? Cool. Yes, ma'am.
Would the county courts be the courts of common pleas?
Yes.
They're the county courts. Okay.
Yeah, those are the county courts, except there are some counties that 2 of them are 1, but ours is 1. Chester County is just 1 court of common pleas. Yes?
Kind of go back a little bit. Do you know who wrote the Constitution for Pennsylvania?
I do not.
Okay.
I do not, but he's dead now.
I didn't know if it went as far back as William Penn or anybody.
Well, it would have been written prior to the mid-1750s, so I don't know. It's a good question. Do you know? I don't know. But I know it wasn't. I'll tell you the one thing I know about the Pennsylvania State Constitution is that what they put in there was that if there was going to be an income tax, it had to be a flat tax across the board, which, not my favorite. But yeah, no, I don't know. But that's an easy Google. Okay.
The minor courts, have you explained those yet?
Those are the magisterial and municipal courts. They're called
okay.
minor. And they're not really minor. In fact, I live here in Tredeffen. I've lived here for more than 30 years. And I know Annalisa Sondergaard, who is on her 2nd term as magisterial justice. And before her, Jeremy, who sadly has passed away, was our magisterial justice for a while. And the 2 of them have a very different view of punishment versus rehabilitation. And this is an important concept because some things we demand punishment for. A pedophile priest, we're not going to rehab a pedophile priest. But in some cases, something has happened and the person needs a second chance and some support in getting there. So there was a kid, and he is the son of a friend of mine, and he was arrested at the age of 17. And he went in front of Jeremy, and he was working at a drugstore, and he stole some pills. He didn't steal bottles of pills. He stole like a half dozen pills, 8 pills. And he stole them because he had a problem with alcohol. He had a problem finishing high school. He had a whole bunch of problems. And Jeremy said, we're going to try you as an adult, and we're going to put you in jail. And he went to jail for like a year. And this is not good for well, my opinion, not good for a 17-year-old. And when he got out, part of the deal was that there were going to be random drug and alcohol tests. So he was out about 3 days, and he was tested, and you know, I know you're going to find this shocking, but beer. And so he had to go back to jail for another year. And when he got out, Jeremy was no longer the judge. Annalisa was the judge. And she decided that instead of all this punishment, what this kid, who's now 19, almost 20, needed was to have to go to rehab, to have to commit to going to Alcoholics Anonymous on a regular basis. And so that kid's now like 25, and he's married, he has gotten his GED, he's working a job, he's going to become a father this summer, all because he didn't have to go to jail because a justice believed, in a minor court, believed in the idea of rehabilitation over punishment for a kid who made a stupid mistake. So it does matter who you elect, and there is a certain amount of play in what judges can do at every level. There's certainly mandatory things that they have to do, but that question of rehabilitation versus punishment is something we should all think about, because we're voters here in Chester County, and we'll be voting for judges at various levels this year. Whether you'll be voting for a magisterial judge depends on which township you live in, but we'll all be voting for the other 3 levels of judges. Excuse me. Though not the Commonwealth Court, they're not up this year. Yes, ma'am?
No, I just looked up, Pennsylvania's had 5 constitutions during its statehood. Prior to that, the province of Pennsylvania was governed for a century by a book titled Frame of Government by William Penn, which the first version was in 1682. In 1776 was the first Pennsylvania Constitution, written by James Cannon, George Bryan, and Ben Franklin.
Yeah, now we all know. Thank you for looking that up. Where would we be without Google? All right. So, yes, ma'am.
I have another, you sparked my interest in the Commonwealth Court now. Since it's of such recent origin, you said 68,
Yes.
so that doesn't go back in tradition. Were the reasons for establishing it practical reasons, political reasons?
I have no idea. When I was putting together information for this, I don't know as much about the Pennsylvania court system as I do about the political system. So I started doing research, which is why I have to refer to my notes. And that was the information that I found. I don't know.
The basis of its origin.
No, but you know something? We're going to be having beer night the last Sunday of this month, like we do the last Sunday of every month at World of Beer. Find out, do the research, and come tell us all, buy you a beer, okay? Yes?
When was the Superior Court established? What year?
1895.
And the Commonwealth was 1968, or the Commonwealth, yeah.
1968, and the state Supreme Court was 1684. Okay? Yes, ma'am.
Kind of really basic, silly question, but the Superior Court, or the Supreme Court, I mean, is that where, you know, all different kinds of cases can be ultimately heard if they have not been settled at the lower courts?
What happens at the Supreme Court is they get to make the determination about whether or not they will agree to hear a case. So it's the same thing as at the federal level. They make a decision about whether or not they're going to hear a case. If they decide against hearing it, the highest court's ruling stands.
Oh, okay.
Will they only hear it if it's a constitutional case? It's against the Constitution, is it?
I think so. I think they can make an exception because there's a certain amount of freedom of thought that they have. They'll do it if they think it could be a constitutional issue, but every once in a while there's something, you know, like something odd for some reason.
And if they decline to hear a case, do they give the grounds that do they have to explain or not?
No, nobody does. It's like, yeah, we'll do it, or no, we won't do it. They can, but they don't have to. But often they could just say it's not in our purview. More court questions? This was exciting because I had to research this. It's not my venue. It's not voting. All right. 2019 elections in Chester County. Is anybody in this room, like, who is a citizen not registered to vote? Anybody? Because we could take care of that. Anybody needs to get that taken care of. All right, so we have 3 dates I want to bring to your attention. The first is what's known as petition season, which will run from February 19th to March 12th of this year. And then we have the primary, which will be May the 21st. And then the general election will be November 5th. And in case you ever wonder what the date will be for the general election across the United States, in all the states, is always the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November every year since 1791. And we are the only country in the entire history of the world with free scheduled elections and the bloodless transfer of power. We're the only people who do that. Other people call elections. Mexico had 10 years where they had scheduled elections, but they didn't have that bloodless transfer of power thing. And so we are unique in doing that. And we should appreciate that, and you should vote. People tend to not vote in odd years, in what they call off years. The percentage of people who vote in a presidential election, still dismal, but much higher than in the other years. So what's petition season? People who run for office have to have petitions signed. It's different in different states. In Florida, for example, you can pay to get on the ballot if you want to run for Congress or Senate or your local judge. Or you can have an outrageous amount of petitions signed. About 6-8 years ago, there was a guy running for Senate who was the first person in the history of Florida to actually get all his petitions done because he needed an outrageous amount from every county in the state. He lost the primary, but it was still impressive nonetheless, instead of just writing the check. Here we do petitions, and the number is candidates filing nomination papers must obtain signatures from qualified register electors of the district in an amount equal to at least 2% of the largest entire vote cast for an elected candidate at the last election within the district. Cool, huh? What does that mean in real life? They're low numbers for county things. So if you want to run for like judge of elections or most, some municipal positions, you might need 25 signatures on a petition. For most of the county offices this year, you'll need 250. And so petition season is when the candidates go out and get people to sign their petitions so that they can get on the ballot. And you can sign a petition if you live here and you're a registered voter and you're a member of the party for which that person is representing. Now, judges are a little different because most judges and most school board members cross-file. I'm sorry?
Can you sign on 2 petitions?
You can sign the number of petitions for the number of people running for that office. So we're going to get to the county commissioners. There are 3 commissioners, but there will be 2 candidates from each of the 2 major parties, plus any third-party candidates that might, in July or August, be able to get on the ballot. So you can sign for 2 people. In next year, when we have petitions for the delegates for the different presidential candidates, you'll be able to sign for 1. If you sign for 2, it invalidates both your signatures. So it's the number of people that there can be. And the the petition season is for both the major parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, and there will be parties every weekend where you can go to people's houses and you can look on the websites of whatever your party is and find out where they are. And often the candidates will show up at some of these parties so that you can meet them and sign their petitions. Although parties tend to be in private houses, and sometimes the person who owns the house has a preference in contested races and will not allow certain people to come to those parties. I find that interesting. My personal preference is that parties don't endorse, that the people decide. But what I know is that most people are not as much of a political junkie as I am. Like when I say I know who's running, it's not just that I know who's running. They've probably sat in my kitchen, we've had a conversation, I know them, they know me, because everybody's got to have a hobby. That's all I can say. Everybody's got to have a hobby, and I spend a certain amount of time with people who say, I'm thinking of running for such and such an office. What are my chances? And, you know, what do you think about X, Y, and Z? I've been doing that for a long time. But you want to sign petitions. And you want to sign petitions, and you can also carry petitions. So I have candidates that I personally favor. I will be carrying petitions around my neighborhood to get signatures from my neighborhood. And what I've learned over the years is no matter whether petition season is from February to March or from January to February, because it's dependent upon when the primary date is, it's always really cold. Back in 2016, the daughter of neighbors of mine wanted to run to be a delegate for Bernie Sanders. And this is someone who had no interest in politics. Our dogs used to play together when she was like 10. And she had no interest in any of this, but she was very enamored of Bernie Sanders. And she says, I want to do this because, you know, we don't vote in the primary for presidential candidates. We vote for people who will represent them at the convention. And she said, I don't know what to do. So I said, I'll help you. And there are rules with the petitions. They are not on 8.5 by 11 inch paper. They are on longer paper. They have to be double-sided. You have to fill them out correctly. You have to have them notarized. You have to sign them. And to get them signed, if you are a candidate, you have to go from door to door to door. And for being a delegate, you need like several thousand signatures. And she'd never done that before, so we started knocking on doors. And now she's a political person, and she did end up going to the convention. Yes, ma'am?
This year, the petitions are on 8.5 by 11.
You're kidding.
And
they changed it?
They changed it.
Since last year? I stand corrected. 8.5 by 11.
There's 15 signature lines. On the back is all the affidavits, so you're going to have to have lots of sheets of paper.
Yeah.
There's only 15 signature lines.
Yeah, but you know, you need 250. The people want 2,500. Do you know why they changed it? They finally come around to like modern life.
I don't know whether people were having a difficult time with copying them.
We all had a difficult time for all those years. I'm so glad this happened. Sometimes things happen, I know nothing about it, and I'm surprised and happy about it. But yeah, so, and the other thing is, there will be hyper-local elections this year for boards of supervisors and mayors and school boards. And I don't know, because there's, you know, like 600 different districts in Chester County for all this stuff. But if you're interested in running, you too can run for school board, can run for the board of supervisors. And you can go on the Chester County website, and they have a running for office section, and they'll tell you everything that you need to do. Anybody interested in like running for school board or anything like that? No? Okay. All right. And then we have the primary election. Yes, ma'am, you want to run?
No, not the township I live in. But, no, I have a question. You were saying that people can have preferences to who they allow into their petition parties. Does that presuppose then pre-registration and screening at the door?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Like, if you know someone's going to have a party in their house, and they can choose which petitions they put out on the table for people to sign. They can choose which candidates they allow into their house.
Oh, candidates, not just general voters can come in.
Oh yeah, any voter can go in there. It's the candidates. And so, and because we have an amazing number of contested positions this year. And
But entrance is allowed for the citizenry. It's just.
yeah, if you live there, you want to go to a party where you live, because there'll be local petitions also. You won't be allowed to sign. I don't know which township you live in, but if you lived in Tredyffrin, you couldn't go to Malvern and sign a school board petition there, because you're not a resident over there. You have to sign here.
And then my other question was about, now I know that third parties don't have primaries.
They do not.
But do they have the same tolerance level, like you said, or have they changed it? You said 2% of the previous election. I know it used to be higher for third parties. Is it still?
I think it is still higher. I'm not positive. And I got a thing about third parties, which is about ballot access. I think it's nice if people want to run in a third party, but the United States of America is a two-party system. We've had, over the years, different parties. We've had the Whig Party, and the Whig Party almost made a comeback in Florida and in Colorado. We had the Democratic Republican Party, which became the Democratic Party. We had the Tories. But there's always been the Bull Moose Party. Didn't work out that well. But two, and I think a lot of the people who run in a third party, I wanted to keep this really bipartisan and non-political. I mean, it's hard for me in ways I can't even begin to explain. And the parties ostensibly stand for something. The major parties, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, as well as the third parties, write a platform every 4 years. Most people have never read a party platform. I read all the party platforms every 4 years because, did I mention I'm a junkie? And I'm interested in what they stand for. And I am a registered Democrat. I've been a registered Democrat since I started voting. And if I want to change something within the Democratic Party, I'm going to get involved and I'm going to help to rewrite the platform, because that's what the party stands for. On the Republican side, when you read their platform, they're people who really believe the things that they stand for and they fight for. When you read the platforms from the Green Party and the American Federalist Party and all these things, they tend to be more one issue. They all have the platitudes of, we're going to do right by America. We want to support American families. We want to support American jobs. We want to support American education. But often, they're very focused on something that matters to them. And I think it detracts from people that are willing to work the system. And my own personal feeling on this is that one of the reasons that government at all levels is broken, although starting to get fixed, is because people have lost respect for the parties. People have lost respect for governance. And people have lost respect for the idea that you work your way up. This is the Tredyffrin Major place where the Board of Supervisors sits right up there. Some of the members of the Board of Supervisors over years have gone on to be county commissioners and row officers, et cetera, and have gone on to be state reps, et cetera. And that's good, because you learn by doing things. And I do not believe that, for example, U.S. President is an entry-level position. I think that we have all learned that that's not a good thing. My personal preference is cut your teeth doing this and then learn to do this. Make your friends, learn how to pass. It's easier to pass legislation at this level than it is at the federal level. Learn and go. And I don't believe that third parties have that much of an opportunity to learn and move up because they tend to be ideologues.
I didn't want to discuss the merits of the two-party system. I just wanted to address the fairness that would be involved in requiring more signatures
There's
from third parties, and what's the rationale behind that, except for party control?
there's no fairness about third parties. Ballot access is different in all 50 states. So when you have somebody like Howard Schultz who wants to run as an independent, he's going to have to get on all those ballots. Some places it'll be money, some places it'll be petitions, and the parties will make it harder.
I'm talking about within the state of Pennsylvania.
Within the state of Pennsylvania, you have to do what you have to do. It's not that onerous. It's not like a party person needs 100 signatures and a third party person needs 10,000 signatures. But yeah, they make it more difficult.
Differently about that.
What, that they,
Requirements of many more signatures.
yeah, but it's not 100 times as much. It's not 25 to 10,000. Is
Who
it?
signs those petitions? The third party?
I don't remember the figures.
Who signs the third party? Obviously not a Republican.
You have to be not a Democrat or a Republican. Yeah, so yeah, but in Pennsylvania there was I have a list that was given to me of the different parties that people belong to in Chester County, because when you register to vote, you can pick Republican, Democratic, Independent, or other, and you can write in whatever you want. And people will write in, I am my own party, the Mickey Mouse Party, the Pizza Party. We have Whigs. We have 14 Whigs in the county.
Independents can sign third-party petitions.
Yeah, because they're not Democrats or Republicans, but yeah, independents, any other party, and there is an independent party, but there are also independent people, depending on how you sign that up. So yeah, you can do that. But we've had candidates in the county who were third party. We've had them run for judge. 2 years ago, we had somebody run for mayor in Phoenixville, and I talked to the guy who ran for mayor of Phoenixville a couple of years ago as a third-party candidate, and he ended up saying that he would have done much better if he would have run on one of the party lines, because it is a stacked system. It's a two-party country.
It still rubs me that, there is a significant, when you look percentage-wise, more signatures needed for third parties, and it just, to me, it's limiting my options,
I'm Googling over here. Last year, there was a lawsuit won by a third-party candidate, and it reduced the amount of signatures needed for third party because it was such a discrepancy, like up to 30 times what a Democrat or Republican would need.
Yeah.
So it looks like the court agreement caps the requirement at 5,000 for third-party candidates. They also no longer have to pay legal challenges, which in the past have run into tens of thousands of dollars.
Do you feel better about the third party now? Okay, they're not going to win.
But it allows us more choice.
And more choice is not necessarily a good thing. And I want to flash back for all of you who are old enough to remember the 2000 election, Ralph Nader. It's how we got George Bush. That's what a third party will do. In Pennsylvania in 2016, Jill Stein, who was a third party candidate, garnered more votes than Donald Trump won by. Had she not run, it's a far better chance that Hillary Clinton would have won Pennsylvania. Now, would Jill Stein have been a better president? I doubt it, because she's nutsy. but she was a choice, and she did run, and she ran in, I believe, all 50 states, but she was never going to win. She just split votes. The only third-party candidate that didn't split votes was Ross Perot, because they found out that he drew evenly from both candidates. But that was a real oddity. But I understand, and, you know, but it's not, I don't know what to say about it. It's a two-party system. Eventually, it will probably change, but not this year.
We couldn't do that without the participation of third parties moving the major parties one way or another, so.
I believe that both parties, both major parties have greatly shifted in the last 2 years, and that it was the members of their own parties that made them shift. The Republican Party shifted. What direction is outer space? Whatever direction that is. And the Democratic Party shifted much further to the left. So anyway, so let's talk about the offices that are up this year, because I want to get you all out by 8:30 so you have time to get your popcorn made prior to the speech tonight. Row offices, well, the county commissioners are not considered row offices, but this year the row offices in Chester County, the district attorney, prothonotary, recorder of deeds, register of wills, and the sheriff are row officers in Chester County. In other places are not elected, they're hired because they're considered to be, you know, positions that are necessary. What we do is we have some row officers that are up every 2 years, and they serve 4-year terms. So the county commissioners, we have 3 county commissioners, and there are different systems of county governments in the same way that there are different systems of city and town governments. Sometimes you have like a city council and a mayor. Sometimes you have a board of supervisors. Sometimes you have a council, and from within the council, the mayor is elected. And at the county level, sometimes you have a county executive and you have a board. But here we have 3 county commissioners. And normally what happens is 2 come from one party and 1 comes from the other party. Because the way that they count the votes, the top vote getters will win, and then whatever the other party is, not the third party, the other major party, unless the third party person is the major vote getter, they will have the other slot. So it has been in Chester County that it has been 2 Republicans and a Democrat for time immemorial. And that might change this year. And what the county executive, the county commissioners are doing is they're like the executive branch. And they sort of run the counties. They pass some rules and regulations. They have or oversee the different departments like aging and housing and et cetera. And that's what they do. It's what's considered to be a weak form of county government. If you have a county executive and a board underneath, that's considered much more strong in terms of how a county runs. Basic government. Questions about county commissioners? So this year, the 2 incumbent Republican county commissioners are running for re-election. So there will be 2 of them on the ballot, and 2 of them will be elected in the primary to run for the general. On the Democratic side, there are 4 people running, and that is for 2 positions. And all 6 of those people have been invited to come here on March the 6th, 7th. We'll be sending out information on it to come and talk to people, and we'll have not a debate, but people will be able to ask questions and stuff like that. To the best of my knowledge, there's never been a contested race on the Democratic side for county commissioner. It's exciting.
Are there qualifications for the commissioners?
You know, there are no qualifications legally for anything that anybody runs for, except you have to be a certain age for some positions. You have to be a resident. But in terms of, you know, do you need a college degree? Nobody ever does that. And that's one of my bugaboos. I think that there should be things that you have to do to be able to do so. Like to be a magisterial judge, you don't have to be a lawyer. You do have to pass a qualifying exam.
You don't have to be a lawyer.
You do not have to be a lawyer. This is why it pays to know your candidates, if that makes any sense. So anyway, but yeah, no, there's not. I mean, I have my own ranking system, but that's just personal in my head between my ears, and sometimes I share with friends. The district attorney, I believe Tom Hogan is running again, and there's one Democrat that is running against him. Her name is Deb Ryan. And I think we all know what a district attorney does. They investigate crimes, they try to prevent crimes. They are the district attorneys, the prosecutors for the county. And then we have the prothonotary, which is hard to pronounce and even harder to spell correctly because every time you type it out, you get the little thing underneath it. And what's interesting is that there's a clerk of courts, which was, the position was elected 2 years ago. And a prothonotary is kind of, sort of like a clerk of courts, but different. The clerk of courts runs the courts themselves. The prothonotary helps with e-filings and can give you information if you want to go to court pro se. She's sort of like the person to help the citizens. Although I do want to say this because I know the clerk of courts and I knew the old clerk of courts. There's a lot that you can do in a government position depending on your dedication to your position. There are only two reasons that people run for office, and that's any office. One, because they want to enrich themselves and they're doing it for them. And then there are the people who run for office because they want to do for the citizenry. And those are the only two reasons people run for office. Why else would you do it? And so when you get a position, you can make a lot out of it. Our current clerk of courts, between the time she was elected and she started working, she was investigating why there was so much paper in the court system, what could be computerized, what kind of money would that take, because that would make things more efficient and better for the people. So then we have the recorder of deeds. And probably everybody has dealt with the recorder of deeds. If you own a house, that's where your real estate information went, and there's a number of other things. It's a public repository of certain records in the county, and it's important because the person that you want them to be able to be a good reader, and you want them to be honest, because that's kind of important. And then there's the Register of Wills, and this is a really interesting position because I'm sure that you think that if you have a Register of Wills, that's, you know, where your will goes and there's probate. And my mom passed away last summer, and I needed to call the Register of Wills where she lives, where she had lived, because I had a question. And they were so nice about what's her name, and we'll look up the number for you, and they were able to do that. And that's something that a Register of Wills will do. But here in Pennsylvania, they do two other things. One, they run the Marriage License Bureau, which is kind of funky. I got married a little over 3 years ago, and we went to Montgomery County to the Register of Wills, and they have this little area in the back, and it says, welcome couples, and they've got hearts and everything, and that's their little marriage area where you go to fill out your paperwork, and you come back, and 3 days later, and you sign everything, and it's just such a nice little carve-out. And also, the Register of Wills is responsible for things related to the Orphans Court. And the Orphans Court has to do with people who really cannot defend themselves. So if you have the opportunity to elect someone who has a dedication to children, anyone can run the Marriage Bureau, and but we do give credit to the people that have the glitter and the sparkles, because some of us really like that. My husband, not so much, but I was just thrilled. And they don't marry you there, but you can do all your paperwork. And finally, there's sheriff. I think y'all perhaps have heard our current sheriff is not running again. Her name is Bunny Welsh. And she was asked to not run. She's a Republican. She was asked to not run by her party. She's currently under investigation for expropriation of funds related to dogs. Dogs! And so there are a number of people running for that position. And it's interesting about sheriffs. If you ever saw like Smokey and the Bandit, you know, you would get an idea. Does anybody know Smokey and the Bandit? Anyway, it was a movie where with Burt Reynolds, and they had the guy with the big stomach who was the
Jackie Gleason.
who was Jackie Gleason?
Jackie Gleason was the sheriff.
I thought it was the other guy. Anyway, but kind of dumb and, you know, kind of backwoodsy and this, that, and the other. That's not really what sheriffs are. Sheriffs will, like if you have to serve someone with papers, they'll go serve your papers for them. They're in Chester County, in terms of real crime fighting, they're kind of secondary to the police forces. There are a number of police forces, including Tredefrans, here in the county that really do things. The people in Tredefran, once they're not patrolmen, they're like sergeants and above, they have to do 2 weeks at North Island training with the SEALs. And so that they're in charge of the SWAT team for the county. And that's stuff that they do in concert with the sheriff, but we'll see. So those are our row officers that are up this year. And I do not know of any third-party people running for any of those positions, but that doesn't mean that they won't sign up later. I don't know of any. And then we have the people who are going to run for judge this year. So we will have, because once again they're staggered, we don't elect everybody all at once. Supreme Court, Superior Court, Court of Common Pleas, and some of the magisterial justices will all be running this year. And again, you can check whether or not they're lawyers. You can just check with the Bar Association. But you do have to be a lawyer to be in the higher courts. And in Chester County, there's cross-filing. So the people running for the Court of Common Pleas for Chester County, there are, last I heard, 2 Republicans and 6 Democrats, which is 8 people vying for 2 positions. And I don't know if you know, so you know how names are arranged on a primary ballot? By lottery. And you only think I make that up, but I do not. And they do it by lottery all across the state for everything for the primaries. The positions in the general election are in the order of the major parties first, then the minor parties. And the first major party is the party of the incumbent governor. So that's how we do that. And the people running for the Court of Common Pleas, they're all lawyers. Some of them are currently magisterial justices. And some of them have said on the Democratic side that they will drop out if they do not receive the endorsement of the County Democratic Party. Others have said, I don't care whether or not you endorse me, I'm running anyway. And it's kind of interesting. But when you see your ballot, you will not know the party of the person who is running for a Court of Common Pleas justice, unless you actually know. And we will, Indivisible Chester County will, again, third year in a row, be putting out candidate information, and we'll let you know what party they are, and we'll ask the people questions, and you'll see where they stand on things. So does anybody have any more questions?
We usually can get sample ballots, right? Even for the primary.
You can always get sample ballots. You want to know where to get your sample ballots? But it's still not going to tell you the party.
No, but you can look up, they normally have websites, so you go on the websites and
Yes.
compare a lot.
But you might want to look ahead of time to decide whose petition you want to sign. That you can get from the parties. The parties list their candidates countywide. And if you're looking for information on people who are running at the hyper-local level, you can look at the website of the township party. And they generally list all of that. Ballots, sample ballots don't come out until about a month before the primary. So they'll be out in April, but there's a lot of opportunities between now and then. Do you know why they come out so late? Because they have to make sure that, nobody died, there are no challenges. Sometimes our ballots are really late because there is a challenge to somebody going to be on the ballot. Things go to court and they have to delay printing. So they won't show you the sample ballots until they go to print. And then you can always go to chesco.org and go to voter services and go to sample ballots. And the way that you do this, because there's hundreds of them, to find your place is every polling place in Chester County has a 3-digit numeric code. And if you put in that code, you can find out, it'll take you right to your ballot.
Good question on the Supreme Court. Is there positions on the Supreme Court available this year? And if not, the people will still be elected, correct? People will stand for the Supreme Court, but is there positions on the Supreme Court?
I believe that there is someone up, I believe that there is a position up this year for the Supreme Court.
Is that the same in every situation? Are there elections held where a person is elected but there isn't a position there for them?
No, there has to be a position, unless they're retention, because there's also retention elections. And I honestly don't know who's running for the Supreme Court because I haven't looked into it, but I will find out.
Yeah, I saw something about at some point, I think it was last year or the year before.
But yeah, sometimes we lose a justice who goes to jail, but what? People say to me, why? I'll say, if something is wrong, you should report it. And they'll go, oh, no, it could be bad for the party. It could be bad for this. And I say, the truth is better. If you're a criminal, go to jail. I mean, a real criminal. But there could be retention elections. And I honestly don't know because I was more interested in the stuff that was more Chester County, things. Kadita will know. Kadita will know everything. We have her, I think we have her in April, so.
There is someone running for the Superior Court, I'm blanking on his name.
Yeah, no, there's somebody running for that, but the Supreme Court's different, so that I don't know. And thank God for Google. So, but if does anyone have any more questions?